From 2003 Media, I'm Campbell Barron, and this is The Ones Who Succeed. Welcome to the program. Hey.
What's up, man?
You look very similar to this guy I saw on the Globe and Mail.
Yes. Probably better looking on the Globe and Mail.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely been a pretty exciting time. Ironically, we didn't even know that they were featuring us as the cover story until the magazine came out. So that was a pretty big surprise. We knew we had gotten listed and that they were doing a story, but they never said that it was the cover story. So it was a big win for everyone on the team.
That's a long way since we first met at Lululemon a while ago.
Yeah, it's totally that name.
Today on the show, I'm excited to have a conversation with Marc Lafleur. Now, Marc and I go way back, and when I say way back, I mean 14-year-old Campbell in a Lululemon with his mom way back. So here's the story. My mom and I were at a shopping mall, and she was looking for new pants, and so we both walked into a Lululemon to browse, and I'm glad I tagged along, as when I entered the store, I was greeted by this nice guy giving away free bacon samples to promote his subscription meat box company, truLOCAL. And 14-year-old me, being as curious as ever, started chatting about their business model and fundraising efforts. I recently had cold emailed and met with the tech investor that they were about to pitch on the Canadian version of Shark Tank, Dragon's Den. Needless to say, this totally spontaneous experience led me to stay in touch with Marc and the truLOCAL team. I eventually shot a promo video for the company back in my video agency days. And fast track to 2020, I'm on my Instagram feed and I see Marc's face on the cover of the Globe and Mail's Report on Business with the title, Canada's Top 100 Businesses. truLOCAL was ranked 14th. It was time to have Marc on the pod. And so, Marc, based in Waterloo, Ontario, joined this program via Zoom to discuss his origin story, the subscription box food wars, and of course, how to build a company that ranks number 14th out of Canada's top 100 businesses. That's all coming up. This is The Ones Who Succeed. I'm Campbell Barron. My conversation with Marc Lafleur starts now. Well, Marc, I appreciate your time. Great to get to talk to you.
Yeah, happy to be here,
So we go way back. But before we get into that, if you can briefly introduce yourself, who are you and what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Marc Lafleur, and I'm the co-founder and CEO of truLOCAL. And yeah, it is crazy because we do go way back. I think you got introduced to truLOCAL probably about a year after we started. And at that time, truLOCAL was all about, we wanted to find an easy and convenient way for people to get value-added meat products. And at the time, like I said, 4 years ago, there weren't a lot of options to find those types of products. Like you would either have to drive to the farmer or you'd have to, whether it be going to Whole Foods or something along those lines. And the variety was limited, or there was the barriers where it came, like I said, with the travel. So we figured that why not use best practices from all these other industries? Meal kits have been raising hundreds of millions of dollars. And why can't we take that and put it into a niche market? So we built truLOCAL. And the whole idea is that you can go online, you can browse from products from producers in your own province and mix and match from all these different producers. So if you've got a favorite farmer out in Sudbury, but you're living in Windsor, well, now you can actually shop with that, whether it be 100% grass-fed beef farmer or pasture-raised chicken farmer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, seems pretty straightforward and seems like there would have been a demand and there is. We met at Lululemon very spontaneously. No fancy cold emails here. I think it was in 2016. I think it was around that period of time. Walk me through what was going on in your life as the founder of the company pre-meeting in Lululemon.
So pre-meeting at Lululemon was, a very naive stage of life, right? I think it was our first successful startup that got any sort of traction. truLOCAL was my third startup. And I think going into it still is very green. I think you get this idea of where you're going to be in 12 months and 24 months, and it usually tends to take a lot longer than that. So for us, our days were literally just the pure hustle. So we would do everything from try to work on the business, figure out what our goals were going to be, what kind of KPIs were we working towards, to trying to raise money, try to find investors. But at the same time, we had to run the business, right? So there was only two of us. I think there was actually probably four of us at that time. So we would have to do all that, the business development stuff, but then also go and pack the boxes. So we would literally then go pack the boxes. And then, of course, when we met at Lululemon, we were doing pop-up shops. So we were doing the pop-up shops as well. So life was interesting back then, but I think also it was a lot simpler. I think a little bit, not that there was less stress, but I just think that it was a different type of stress where you were trying to live week to week rather than now as the business gets bigger, you're living kind of quarter to quarter or year to year as you're working through your goals.
Mm-hmm. And so this is an interesting period of time because 2016 was a little bit of this like subscription box wars, I would say. Like subscription box, I had Michael Dubin, who started Dollar Shave Club, on the show on season 1, and he sold the company in 2016, started it a few years prior, but he sold it in 2016 because that's when these boxes were hot, like send razors in a box, Casper and Blue Apron, etc. So like walk me through the thought process in regards to how you felt you could stand out.
Yeah. So I think it's an interesting conversation, because I think there's a difference between subscription boxes and a subscription-based business model. So when I looked at subscription boxes, I was always looking at it as these curated boxes where every single month you would get a box, you kind of set it and forget it, and you show up with a different variety of products. And that was kind of the whole idea of a subscription box. I always thought that with truLOCAL, we weren't really a subscription box. We were trying to, I guess, disrupt is such an aggressive word, especially considering you've got all these meal kits and people delivering food online. But we were definitely trying to give an easier way for people to shop for meat products specifically. And it just so happened that it made sense, because it's a consumable product, that we would have a subscription-based business model. So I think for us to stand out, once again, it was really important to find our niche. So number one, when we looked at the broad range of what was considered the online food delivery market, you're talking about, I think back then it was probably about like $28 billion. And we're looking at companies like Uber Eats. You're looking at companies like Instacart. You're looking at companies, even just restaurants that deliver food. And you've also got the meal kits in there. truLOCAL, we've always said this, we're not trying to go after everybody, right? We're trying to go after the people that resonate with this. And once again, it's the same thing when people talk about, how do we compare to the meal kits? Are they competitors? Are they not? And we've never looked at them as competitors, because it's two very different customer bases. So for us, it was like, there's a lot of opportunity here, but there's already a lot of really, really big players. How can we stand out, and how can we kind of carve off our own individual niche? So we decided to go once again into the protein side of things. We saw a big challenge that we had experienced. And then when we were looking at the protein side of things, there really was nobody doing, once again, using that subscription-based model, focusing on e-com, and really doing it well and executing well. So right off the bat, our biggest competitors were the company that I was working for. So companies that were going door to door, trying to sell years worth of meat. So when you looked at it, we were just improving on that design. Once again, looking at it 4 years ago.
So it seems like COVID has not necessarily been a terrible thing for you guys. And, if I was going to take a guess, right, you're a subscription food box that's delivering, like you said, local meat. So as a result, it seems like you're hitting kind of all the key pillars that would make someone want to sign up, especially when, leaving their home presents a health risk. Take me back to truLOCAL's operations pre-COVID-19. So let's say November, December of 2019. And then walk me through truLOCAL's operations now, today.
Yeah. So, it's kind of really surreal, right? Because pretty much the world's on fire. Like 2020 just, took us for a ride. And I always feel like we're fortunate and we're blessed that we're in a situation, and we're one of the few businesses that was able to grow during COVID. And I think one of the biggest things to understand, it's crazy, right? Because you'll be talking to friends and other business owners, and you really never know what to say, because you talk to some friends and you say, hey, look, we're having hiring issues. And they're like, well, I closed my doors yesterday. So it's sensitive topic, right? Mm-hmm. So for us, in December, things were rocking and rolling. January is always a busy time for us. We heard about this virus, but didn't think much of it at all, right?
No one did. Yeah.
SARS and MERS and all this, and you're like, hey, it's here, and it's not going to be that big of a deal. And it wasn't until you start getting the rumors of lockdowns, and I guess that would have been probably in March. And we work, we work with quite a few different partners, especially in the shipping side of things. And these guys are very well connected, billion-dollar industries. And we started hearing these whispers and these rumors from executives about lockdowns and how businesses are going to be shut down, and what does that mean? And of course, I don't think the Canadian government knew what that meant at the time. So nobody knew what to expect, except for we realized that we're like, oh my God, are we considered an essential service? And if you actually go online, and there's probably other founders in the food delivery space that are like this, we didn't know. We feel we're an essential service. Of course, we've got tens of thousands of customers waiting for us to get their food to them, but you know how the government can be. It's very black and white. So they address grocery stores, but nobody was addressing food delivery. So we started reaching out to some of the bigger meal kit players, guys that might have a little bit more pull, and trying to talk to be like, hey, what do you guys think is going to happen here? And nobody knew. So we started going through lawyers and everything to figure out, okay, look, if there's lockdowns, are we deemed essential service? All this type of stuff. And we started stockpiling as much as we could. We had to talk to people. What about our corrugate, right? For our boxes, you're not an essential service. So however long this is going to last, we got to stockpile boxes in case we're an essential service and you're not. Ice, things like that. and suppliers. So at the same time, you're starting to see all these plants shut down. Okay, well, what about our butchers and what about our farmers? What's going on there? So it was a really, really scary time. Fortunately, we got deemed an essential service, which got us over that hump. But now we're we're an essential service. How do we keep running and keep running safely? And I'll never forget, we do our monthly, we call them our war room meetings, for our entire company. And I distinctly remember saying that, look, we're no longer a food company. We're no longer about anything other. We're not a tech. We're not doing truLOCAL. We're now a warehousing company. We're a logistics and a warehousing company because our volume tripled and we were struggling to get orders out the door. We had to hire.
Oh my God.
So
volume tripled people? And your resources are strained.
Exactly. And then of course you have to hire. Our biggest thing was making sure that how do we do interviews safely? How do you bring in an extra, 30% of employees while doing interviews safely? So we started realizing, look, we are nothing other. Forget all marketing, forget everything else. Take care of our existing customers, and we are now a warehousing and logistics business. So we did that for a couple months, keeping the warehouses as safe as possible. We instilled a work from home policy for our office staff, which is still in effect now. So all of our head office staff are working from home, but our warehouses remained open. So that's where we're at today. And luckily, a lot of the policies and a lot of the quick movements that we had to make during COVID, once again, just around, health and safety, washing down, deep cleans, temperature checks, how are we dealing with sick days? All that stuff was a big challenge. And then once again, on the flip side, inventory, right? So you've got, and it wasn't so much us, like we were worried, but you got a lot of these smaller producers, right? So you got small producers that work with small butchers, and they're starting to freak out, being like, well, look, what happens if, what's happening at the big players, the Cargills and everything starts happening here. So it was definitely a scary time.
A couple of things there. One, I think it's very interesting that you mentioned the rumors about a lockdown. I remember in early March, I was sitting at the dinner table, and my dad has a friend who has basically access to the people that would decide how are we going to deal with this. And so the same reason you kind of had connections, we were listening and we're like, oh no, there's going to be a lockdown, get ready. And so we went to the grocery store. People didn't know at the time. It was so funny. It's people are just going about their day and we're just stockpiling stuff, because we didn't know what does the lockdown mean? Does that mean no grocery store for a few days? Is it open still? There's, and our uncle he lives in Shanghai. And so, unfortunately, he owns 3 restaurants there. So he had to shut those down, or at least temporarily close those down in January, right? And so he's telling us, oh no, this thing's going to come, get ready. And I also think it's interesting that you called up your fellow subscription box or your fellow, food delivery, whatever you want to call it, box companies to see hey, what are you guys doing? Because in business, and at least in the media, the way media portrays business, it seems those guys are your enemies. I mean, not really, right? We went over that they're not really your competitors, but still, do you keep a good relationship with kind of your larger incumbents? And walk me through some of those conversations. That sounds very interesting. Coming up, I continue my conversation with Marc Lafleur. We'll be right back after this. Stick with us. Welcome back to The Ones Who Succeed. In my conversation with Marc Lafleur, I'm Campbell Barron. And I also think it's interesting that you called up your fellow subscription box or your fellow, food delivery, whatever you want to call it, box companies to see hey, what are you guys doing? Because in business, and at least in the media, the way media portrays business, it seems those guys are your enemies. I mean, not really, right? We went over that they're not really your competitors, but still, do you keep a good relationship with kind of your larger incumbents? And walk me through some of those conversations. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah, I would say that our direct competitors we don't have a relationship with, people that do exactly what we do, so exclusively sell meat online. But people that are adjacent, that we love to stay as connected as possible with them. I think it makes the conversations a lot easier, and you get the vibe when you get on the call. Everyone's trying to if we're talking to one of the larger meal kits, kind of trying to get a vibe to see, look, are we trying to compete with you guys? Are you trying to compete with us? Is there a world, or can we have conversations here? And I think that just over the years, we've kind of shown that, hey, look, we're going in our lane, you're going in your lane. I always say the same thing with the meal prep. The meal prep guys, I would say that we have a great relationship with those guys as well. We kind of talk mostly last mile. We talk about inventory, warehousing, market conditions, things like that. I don't think we've ever still to this day dove deep into marketing tactics. but we do try to keep in touch. Even now, we'll get a couple texts a month. Someone will be like, hey, how's your month going? What are you seeing? So stuff like that.
Interesting.
But yeah, I think it's valuable. I think, like I said, I think entrepreneurs are competitive and founders are competitive. I think it is hard to have that civil relationship with a direct competitor. Some people do it well in certain markets. Maybe something that I'll eventually get wiser and be able to lean into that a little bit more. But I think that if you're able to find someone in a market that isn't directly competing with you, but is doing similar things, those are the best relationships you can build.
So how have you dealt with this idea of competition? Because it seems like every founder, deals with it differently, if you will. And it could be a little, if you're kind of an early mover in regards to a concept like truLOCAL was, it could be a little frustrating to kind of see, people just hop on the scene and just kind of look at you and then, get to work building basically the same thing, trying to take your customers. Like that could be a little frustrating. And it does seem like every prominent business has like their rival, right? Amazon has Walmart, and even going back to the Dollar Shave Club, example, they have Harry's, and Blue Apron has HelloFresh and a bunch of others. And so it's totally normal, right? It's not something that's out unheard of. But how have you managed your relationship, or not your relationship, but just internally at the company? And how do you look at direct competition? How does it make you feel?
Yeah, I'd say it's a little more than frustrating. When you build something out and then someone goes and does the exact same thing, it's definitely frustrating. I always tell this to people, and I think founders can relate, we're at war every day. We quit our jobs, our friends quit our jobs. We've recruited people from other businesses. We've, as founders, we've taken on a lot of responsibility for success, and we've brought people along the way. So anytime anybody looks to threaten that, you're at war. Now, on the flip side of that, competition is good for the consumer. And that's one of the biggest things to understand, is that if there was no competition, there's no pressure to evolve or innovate. So I think that it's kind of this vicious cycle. And I think that as a founder, you need competition. I think that if there was none, it would kind of just get boring after a while. I think that competition is something that fuels me. I can actively say that some of the biggest moves I've ever made in the business came after some sort of threat from a competitor. So whether it be someone coming in, and then that kicked us into gear to move forward and move faster. I think one thing that we've done really well, and obviously Jeff Bezos is very famous for saying this, but we've never focused on our competitors in terms of strategy. We focus on our consumers. We focus on our customers, and that's what we innovate to, and that's what we move to. So if we see a competitor come out doing something, a direct competitor, but doing something very different, there's a lot of businesses or a lot of people that are going to just inherently be like, let's steal that. That's what's working. But I know how hard it is to build a business in this space, and founders know the same in their own respective industries. And I know that there's a lot of things that are pop shots. You take a shot, all right, see if this is going to work. So I think that ironically, when you're not focusing on your customers and you're focusing on your competitors, you're not getting ahead. You're actually taking on their liabilities, because there's a good chance that what they're launching or what they're premium might not work. They're going to try and iterate 10 times before they get it right the same way that you did. So I think there's a little world where it's kind of that happy balance.
Now, going back to COVID, you mentioned truLOCAL, the operations, the non-warehouse workers, the general population went remote, and they still are remote today. And I bring this up oftentimes because it's very interesting to see people's thinking pre-pandemic and post-pandemic into remote work. Personally, where I fall, I think I'm starting to go a little mad, and I think it would be nice to get into an office. I always have like that. But I also understand, and a venture capitalist brought this up to me, that he was saying, like, look, most people don't like their jobs. Like, most people aren't startup founders or VCs who actually like going into the office because there's pool tables and ping pong tables and free food. Most people, to be able to work from home is one of the greatest things that has ever happened to them. And so how is your thinking in regards to remote work? Has it evolved pre and post pandemic? Is it the same? How has it changed at all?
Yeah, well, I think I can speak to truLOCAL first. We have offices in 3 different provinces and then warehouses to go with them. And our
that's
biggest
Ontario, Alberta, and BC.
Yeah. So our biggest thing is that we've already been working remotely for the most part. All of our management meetings are through Zoom anyway, because we've got managers patching in. So when we made the transition to move to work from home, it wasn't that dramatic of a shift. In fact, I would say I think we're more productive. I'm a lot like you. I'm still going into the office. And ironically, it's probably the safest place to be because there's nobody there.
Absolutely.
So I go into the office every day. I'm able to get a lot of work done. And from our team so far, a lot of people have been very happy with work from home. That's why we just keep extending it. I think that another interesting thing to look at when it comes to work from home is that it makes the ability for people to start businesses a lot easier as well. I think that you're going to get a lot of businesses growing a lot quicker because the ability to recruit talent now. So now you don't have to worry about, hey, are you living here? Are you living there? Work from home is the norm. You can hire anybody from anywhere. So I think that work from home is actually, I think it's great. I think that it's based on the individual because you're right. If I had to work from home, I wouldn't be able to do it.
One of the ideas that I like is this idea of a flex model, which is, and this is from an entrepreneur I talked to named Dom, and he was saying, like, you can basically have, and he's building a pretty substantial business, and he anticipates to have, like, kind of like you, right? He anticipates to have offices kind of in multiple locations, and his idea is like you can hire in those locations, and then people can work from home one day, come into the office the other, and the office is more of like a private co-working space. Now you're different. You have warehouse managers, inventory, etc., right? So you, like, those people just can't work from their computer. But as the company grows, you are going to have more software engineers, developers, data scientists, whatever it may be, to kind of get the job done. And so do you anticipate post-COVID 2022, 2023, whenever life goes back to normal, do you anticipate that truLOCAL is going to kind of lean into this? Or do you think, the office is there for a reason? Like, let's get back going.
We're definitely going to do the flex model. Like, I'm a huge believer in that because I know how individualized productivity is. There are some people that are going to thrive in an office setting. And then there are people that'll thrive at home. So for us, we want to have an office. Maybe there's a world where you can get a smaller office, but we want to make it completely optional. As long as the work is getting done and as long as the performance is there and the productivity is there, because our entire culture has been rooted, like, of course, like everybody else, we use Slack actively, Zoom actively, we use email properly, but we invest a lot in making sure that those channels are smooth. So for us, as long as the meetings are being attended, the work is being done on time, we don't have an issue with it. We have a great developer, just as an example, that has always been working from home. And we were really concerned because he works the most ridiculous hours. And we have our team that works out of the office, but we have this other developer who's been with us for about 2 years now, or probably about a year now, and works ridiculous hours. Actually, he's out in BC. So we're working Ontario time, but he's working through the night in BC. And we thought it was going to be this horrible thing. And once again, we use Jira. So working through Jira, working through Slack, working through these project management tools, it's never been an issue. We don't see that as a problem. So when you look at it with developers, why can't that happen with, our consumer experience specialists? At the end of the day, those are individuals that probably love to be working from home. So we're absolutely going to take on the flex model where, look, if you're now going into it, when we do interviews, it is going to be, hey, where would you prefer to work? From home, at the office? We have the option. The standard is work from home, but the office can be optional. That's kind of how we're going to be looking. But we take it, once again, taking it month by month, quarter by quarter. We'll see how things go, but that's what I would like to implement.
I love it. I think that's very, very empathetic. So how much have you raised in total, actually, before I put words in your mouth?
We don't really talk about how
you haven't disclosed.
One of the benefits, we've done all angels, so it's not disclosed.
Okay, interesting. Right. Okay, so fair enough.
We have done 3 rounds, though. I can tell you we've done 3 rounds.
We can say one of your rounds was on the Canadian version of Shark Tank Dragons, and so, one of 3. And so the reason I bring this up is, well, I think it was clear at this point, like, it was working and you guys need to grow. But talk about the obligation. Actually, I guess this doesn't, I was going to say when you take venture money, but you're not. But you're taking angel money knowing, you're taking angel money knowing that you can't just, be a business that doesn't either provide dividends, provide an exit, or go public forever. You can't just stay in your current state forever. You're racing the clock a little bit to do something. And usually that's a sale or an IPO. Talk about that obligation.
Yeah. So I always love talking about this. The only reason that we haven't raised VC money is because I got so many no's. We got turned down so many times. And ironically, that is the best thing that's ever happened to us at this point, looking back on it. Because back in the day, I was just like every other early founder where I'm like, okay, all that matters is get a big round. That's you've won, you've made it. And I think that because the dollars are so big, people and founders think that that's what you have to go after. And I was definitely in that bucket. I remember some of the brutal deals that I was pitching back in the day that if someone had said yes to that, our business would be crippled. we'd be 30% of our equity would be gone to an individual providing no value. So for us, where we're at today, we've raised a substantial amount of money all through angels, and we have full control of the business. There's no preferred shares. We don't have anybody else sitting on our board. And that has allowed us to move quickly. And especially at the size we're at now, that's relatively unheard of. Typically, when you're at our size, you've got VC funding or something along those lines. And I think now, once again, looking at it, back in the day, it was this mentality of growth at all cost. Whereas today you look at it, and I don't believe that's the case anymore. And obviously there's an expectation to grow, but to grow at all costs, AKA you have no clear path to profitability, I don't think that's going to fly anymore. And especially when you see crisis like this, where you're burning and burning and burning and you have no revenue coming in and you never had even figured out in the first place. Yeah. So I think that VCs provide a very valuable support to businesses. I just think you got to decide what type of business you are. Are you a lifestyle business? Is this the type of business that, you're going to maybe have a few employees, you'll pull a salary, maybe like a low six figures, and, you're going to reinvest some of the profits, but that's it. And that's how you're going to grow the business. Are you a venture business where, it's growth at all cost and you need to be,
die trying?
Or die trying, exactly. Maybe it's first to market. Maybe it's a hyper-competitive space, but you have some sort of little innovation that you think might work better. Or maybe it's just you're in a market already that you're like, well, look, the market's so big, we can take a piece of the pie. Or are you building an empire? Are you building a legacy business? Are you building a business that you have no interest in selling? You want to grow fast, but it's there. And once again, the venture back, obviously being focused on acquisition, growth at all costs for acquisition. I think that if you can narrow down which type of business you are, it'll really help decide whether VC money is the money for you or not. And I think nowadays there's a lot of businesses out there that don't necessarily need venture funding. I think that they can keep the equity for themselves, keep the control for themselves, take a little bit of the pressure off, and focus on building more of a sustainable business that mixes growth and profits.
This is interesting. This is something I've kind of wanted to ask you this entire interview, which is, so truLOCAL is the URL for the company is truLOCAL.ca, right? Which means you're servicing Canada at this point, and you're servicing Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. But I do wonder, and I have seen this, I use this example, skip the dishes, right? My American listeners are going to have no clue what I'm talking about. And Skip the Dishes was a Canadian company that was all over Canada. It was completely kicking ass in Canada. And its sale price was a fraction of what it would have been if it was kicking ass in the US, just because the market just isn't as valuable. And same with Endy, Endy mattresses, super successful Canadian company, but their sale was nothing compared to kind of what Casper was, which is super. And now, to be fair, Casper was just a lot bigger, but they were US based, then they expanded to Canada, etc. And so when you look at truLOCAL.ca, do you ever have the ambition to kind of expand what you're doing down in the States or even internationally at some point? I know this is probably extremely difficult to think about because what you're doing now is already really hard, but how do you look at this? Coming up, my conversation with Marc Lafleur continues. The ones who succeed will be right back after this. Stick with us. You're listening to The Ones Who Succeed in my conversation with Marc Lafleur. Welcome back to the program. I'm Campbell Barron. Do you ever have the ambition to kind of expand what you're doing down in the States or even internationally at some point? I know this is probably extremely difficult to think about because what you're doing now is already really hard, but how do you look at this?
Yeah, so when you look at the US versus Canada, it's just the easiest thing is to apply a 10x factor on everything. 10x on population, 10x on market, 10x on revenue, 10x on acquisition, 10x on investment. And it's unfortunate, but it's true, especially considering, and once again, I'm probably biased here, but I think it's a lot harder to start a successful business in Canada, especially if you're dealing with delivery, just because of the geography of Canada. You got, 32 or 38 million people in this massive, massive land space. Getting products to customers is very, very difficult, whereas in the US, it's a lot more dense. So for us, of course, there's ambitions down south. For us, the whole idea is that we just want to spread the truLOCAL model as much as possible. We want people to be shopping from producers within their province, whether it be their state, And we want to enable that. And we want to enable that through e-com, want to enable that through the regional supply chain side of things and through delivery. So yeah, there's always the ambition. I think that truLOCAL, we're proud to be a Canadian company and we want to be one of those Canadian success stories. We understand Canadian consumers. And I think that there's a very big difference between US consumers. And I think a lot of people think that, oh, it's the same thing. It's not at all.
It's not.
The values that Canadians have are completely different than the values that people in the US have. So for us, we've become synonymous as being, part of the, we got the maple leaf in our name, truLOCAL, like we really want to focus on that. And right now, and for the foreseeable future, our mandate is to develop Canada's regional supply chains.
Yeah. Yeah, but you're not excluding it. Okay, this is another interesting thing I've kind of saving for the last, before we get to your magazine appearance here. So the truLOCAL inception story was, like we mentioned, was really like booming during a time of this like subscription box, like everything, right? Razors, meal kits, etc. And we've already talked about how you differentiate. However, Blue Apron went public, and to say it hasn't been going well, to say that IPO didn't kind of hold its value is an understatement. And, I have total respect for their founders. It's clear that building a company is extremely difficult. However, that is like an example, just the unit economics just didn't make sense. And like the public market just ate them alive. I remember looking at their share price. I think they fell from like over $1 billion to something around like 20 million in market cap, which is like very unfortunate.
I thought it was 3 billion.
Yeah.
I thought they dropped from
okay. Yeah, no, I think it was. I think it was quite higher.
Down to 20 million.
Yeah, to something tiny. And that's very unfortunate, right? But when you look at truLOCAL, you do have some of the similar problems, not problems, but challenges, which is like essentially it is a supply chain company, right? Like you got to, especially when you're going with, local, it's difficult. You have to get the meat to this place. You have to like put it together, ship it to places. And then I asked you a question about expanding to the US, and like, it just seems like this is quite a daunting task, and it's clearly hard. You've done quite well at it. But did that Blue Apron experience at all make you really like, did you show the share price to your staff and you're like, guys, we are not going to be these guys? Or have you thought about like kind of the struggles that could be, a public company, or how do you wrap your head around that?
Our biggest thing is that I truly think that what happened with the meal kits and what happened with Blue Apron is they became a commodity and they started only competing on price. And when you're only competing on price, anybody can disrupt you, because anybody can find one part of their supply chain, or anybody can raise a certain amount of money or be willing to take lower margins and outbeat you on price. And that from day one was something that we saw already, because like I said, we're about a year or two after the meal kits started coming out. And to my surprise, meal kits became hyper competitive. I never would have thought that would be a market. It's very complex. You're dealing with fresh products, delivery, yet everyone started spinning up meal kit companies. So I knew from day one that we were never going to compete on price, and we had to make sure that we offered the best. So that way, it's not a situation where we get 2 or 3 other competitors that come out and they're cheaper than we are, and we start sacrificing on quality, or sacrificing on customer service, or sacrificing on the website, or sacrificing the experience to compete with them. And now you've got 3 people playing in that pond. For us, we always wanted to offer the absolute best. We want to offer the best experience, the best customer service, the best product. And we always talk about it. I never went to my team and said that, hey, look, we don't want to become Blue Apron. But what I did say is that we want to become the Starbucks of meat.
Interesting.
And we want to build a brand that has a mission that people can get behind, so that it's not just shopping with meat, right? Like truLOCAL is not just a meat company. They shop with truLOCAL because of what we stand for, what we're able to offer. And then that's part of the brand. And the only reason the brand works is because we've been able to build and execute a business that lives up to that. And that's a testament to the team that we've been able to put together at truLOCAL. So I think for us, the way that we avoid falling into those situations, that we'll never compete on price. We're always going to offer the best of the best. If we're able to slash prices by 15% by switching to a different supplier who doesn't fit our values, we're not going to do that. And I think that a lot of people in the food space only focus on price. And you look at it across the board. Everything that they marketing and this and that, it's always this price. Whereas we market what the value of our product is and what it's about.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, I think that makes a lot of sense. I want to touch on this before we wrap up here, which is in October of 2020, you were on the cover of Globe and Mail Report on Business, and with truLOCAL listed as number 14 out of 100 of Canada's top businesses, which is really like nuts. That's kind of crazy. I'm glad I didn't go to a different location for that initial Lululemon. But I am curious, like, walk me through this feature piece to make a little parallel here. When I launched the podcast, I got an article in the Toronto Star, and like I wasn't on the cover, but it was still a very big deal. And I remember going downtown, going to like a convenience store and like buying like 25 copies, and the person is like, who are you and why do you need 25 copies? And it was like really cool, and I still have them in my room then. It's just like, it's very exciting. And you're on the cover of this like magazine, and obviously that's not why you do this, but you've seen that before with other people that weren't you. And in fact, you wrote this really wonderful caption on your Instagram post, which I'm going to read. It says, from the kid who wasn't supposed to graduate high school to the cover of Globe and Mail Report on Business on Canada's top and growing companies. For all the young Black kids out there, this is where we belong. We belong in boardrooms and investor meetings. We belong at the head of tables and on business magazines. Don't let anybody ever tell you otherwise. The very powerful words. Talk me through that whole experience.
Yeah, so the whole experience, like, it's pretty surreal, especially considering, like I said, 2020. When we started truLOCAL, I definitely never had like any magazine aspirations or anything like that. We wanted to build a business, and to be honest, we wanted freedom. We wanted to get away from having to work a 9 to 5, things like that. And we figured that if we were going to pour our life into it, we should do some good at the same time. And that's kind of where the intersection of truLOCAL came about. I think, there's always an ego to feed, and there's always something that you're like, look, it's nice to get some validation on what you're doing, but we had never gotten that through exposure, like personal exposure or anything in that sense. It was always through, if the business is growing and the customers love us, then that's what it was. So the report on business, was looking for the companies, and we went through the entire process, and they let us know that, hey, we got ranked as number 14 out of 400. So we're like already ecstatic.
That's crazy. That's nuts.
And that's 4 years ago. And once again, like 3 years ago, me and 4 of my teammates were doing pop-up shops at Lululemon, right? So we felt a lot of pride on that. So we obviously, as an entire team, we got 55 employees now. We celebrated, and that was like the biggest win of the year for us. And then they followed up with, hey, are you guys cool if we send a reporter and a photographer down? We're going to do a story. And I'm like, well, of course, that obviously. And the biggest thing with that is that I've seen this report on business before. So we know that there's like 4 or 5 businesses that they do a story on. Right. And that was that. We didn't know if they were going to actually put it up. They said that, like, hey, look, we do a lot of these. We choose whichever ones. And they didn't tell us anything. Now,
I got to ask, sorry, if they didn't tell you anything and you're on the cover and you look like you're on the cover, right? You look like you could have been on the cover of Forbes. So when they're taking photos of you and they're asking you to pose like this, did that not ring any bells? Like, maybe this isn't just a story.
No, honest to God, absolutely not. Because like I said, I've seen these articles before and they have pictures. They have pictures. They sent a guy down, and this awesome photographer, we're just going through this process, and he had me doing like all these things that I thought it was totally weird. Like, if that picture, he had me like kneeling down like in some grass. And I was just like, once again, you don't realize it while it's happening. God. Trust me, because we of course, founders, we think the best of everything. What could it be? What could it be? Even as a team, we're like, wow, if we get a story, we're happy. So literally, it wasn't up until the week of that I had a business meeting with someone. We were doing a Zoom call. And this is the week of, so it would have been the Tuesday before the Friday the article was coming out. And this guy is like, hey, congratulations. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, on the Globe and Mail. And I'm like, oh, like, how'd you know we were on that? And he pulls his phone up to the screen, and he's on the Globe and Mail newsletter, which had a preview of the cover. And literally, honestly, Kev, I'm telling you, probably for like 30 seconds, all of us were just like, holy crap. Like, wow, like we made the cover of the Globe and Mail. And then we got the box in the day before it went out. And it was just like this surreal moment. So, it's such a huge, and the one thing I always say is that, like, it's awesome to be on the cover, but this is such a team effort, and any founder knows this. Like 100%. The fact that we're able to get truLOCAL on there, it's such a huge shout out to all the people that have been involved with it over the past, 4 years. So for us, it was just an amazing experience. And I wanted to make sure that, going through everything with what's going on with BLM, I wasn't supposed to graduate high school. I was a little shit in high school, I despised it. I wasn't good at it. Got into university, and I'm a huge advocate for C's, get degrees. I had to kind of hustle my way through the entire thing. And I think that there's not enough. I think nowadays it's different. There's a lot more access and a lot more intro to business. But on top of that, layer on, Black founders. And it was kind of like for 100%. Me where it's like, look, I know a lot of kids, and, I grew up with a single mom. We didn't have a lot of money, but I was by no means, starving or anything like that. I feel like there are so many kids out there, Black kids, that are in way worse situations. And it's pretty much either be a drug dealer, go play basketball, or be a rapper. And if you start at an early age realizing you're not going to do any of those, you're stuck. So I think it's important that there be more Black businessmen that are achieving success so they can also see that, hey, you know what, maybe I'll go be a Black businessman. So that's a huge thing that for me. And that was kind of a big moment in seeing that. And once again, of course, being able to make that post, it was an awesome experience all the way around.
Very much. Yeah, totally agree. Congrats on that. All right. Well, Marc, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it.
No, I appreciate it. Honestly, Campbell, same thing to you, because I remember it goes both ways. Meeting you back at Lululemon a few years ago, like what you've accomplished is absolutely incredible. So love keeping in touch with you. Glad to be on the show. And we'll chat. We should do a little jersey swap on articles at some point. So
let's see.
And next time, whenever you're on Forbes, you can send that one over to me.
I appreciate it, Marc.
All right. Take care.
That's Marc Lafleur, one of the ones who succeed. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this show, it would be amazing if you could leave us a review on Apple Podcast. It really helps us out. Or why not tell a friend? That also helps new listeners discover the show. I really appreciate it. If you want to see clips from the show and stay up to date with what I'm working on, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at Campbell J. Barron. You've made it to the end of the show. Thanks for listening. I'm your host, Campbell Barron, and I'll be back in no time.